Right, so hi everyone. Welcome to the Agile West and Wales Regional QI Showcase. So just a little bit of housekeeping in that first of all. So my name is Claire. I am the regional rep for the Western Wales. We just have a few housekeeping things first of all. So if everyone can mute themselves for the kind of entire event if possible. You can have your cameras kind of on or off. We don't mind, honestly. I know Amy's just started it, but if everyone can pop in the chat just who you are, where you're working, just so we have an idea of who is here tonight. So firstly, just a little bit around the West and Wales Committee. So we started probably about a year ago and we've just kind of been slowly developing since then. There's a group of us which is kind of slowly expanding. So it's myself, Amy, Stephanie, Verity and Kerry, and you'll see kind of most of us over the night. And then Tara has just joined us this week as well. So just want to thank everyone for helping me organise tonight's event, and hopefully it all goes pretty smoothly. So just on to a little description of what to expect over this evening. So we have 4 different speakers, so thanks to them for kind of volunteering. They are each presenting around different service improvement or quality improvement projects that they've taken part in. Each speaker has about 10 minutes for their presentation, followed by about 5 minutes of for Q&A. So do feel free to put some questions in the chat box, which Amy is going to monitor. Or if you feel happy to, put your hand up in the 5 minutes at the end of each presentation, and they will hopefully be able to answer some questions. The second one of the night is actually pre-recorded because they weren't able to attend tonight. They have left their email addresses on the slide at the very end. So you can email them if you have any questions, or pop them in the chat as well, and we can always combine them and send them to them. So welcome everyone. Yeah, thanks to everyone for volunteering, and I'm just going to hand over to Kerry, who is going to introduce each of the speakers in turn.
Okay, welcome everybody. So our first talk is from the team at the BRI. So we've got Kathleen and Gemma, who are going to present a project today on the implementation of a specialist older persons therapy team in the emergency department at the Bristol Royal Infirmary. And they're going to be talking through the process of how they undertook their project. Bit of background on both of them. So Gemma's the team lead physiotherapist for the older persons therapy team at the BRI. She's worked there for 15 years, and over in the past 6 years have specialised in older persons therapy. And Kathleen is a clinical specialist occupational therapist in the older people's team, who's been at the BRI for 7 years and is recently taking up a current post of a clinical specialist OT role. So over to you, Brie.
Thank you, Kerry. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Agile, for having given us the opportunity to present tonight. So my name is Gemma Vaughan-Shaw, as said, and I'm the physiotherapist in the older persons rehab team.
And I'm Kathleen. I'm a clinical specialist occupational therapist in the older persons therapy team.
Okay, so we'll talk about our project of implementing adult therapy services into the emergency department here at the Bristol Royal Infirmary. So just a little bit of background on our project. So before our project started, there were 2 teams working in the emergency department, one being a React service, which was a Monday to Friday service, which was therapists, nurses, and their kind of main remit was admission avoidance, and that was run by Serona Care and Health. And then prior to our project starting, there was also the frailty team, which again was a Monday to Friday service, and that is consultant ACPs, nurses, pharmacy. They were also delivering admission avoidance, but also they were working with the frail older people for those earliest important assessments prior to them being admitted to hospital. So as you can see from that, there was a gap in the service. So there was no cover at the weekend. And I think the potential implications of having no weekend cover is that people being admitted to hospital that don't need to be in hospital, their care could be, met in the community. And also the flow through the emergency department, people queuing in ambulances rather than, being assessed and treated and either being discharged home or being admitted to the wards. It potentially having an impact on the fact that there are prolonged admissions to hospital. Delays in us with a discharge planning, also patients deconditioning, and also I suppose those patients that are being discharged without a therapy input, that actually there could be a potential that they reattend to the emergency department because their needs weren't met. So it's the gap was definitely evident. So the roles of therapists within an emergency department, I think fundamentally the main role of the therapist is to ask the question, is somebody safe to go home? Is that patient safe to go home? And if we have identified some risks, can those risks be managed in the community? I think definitely taking the approach of home first is the best option. And I think that by working together as physios and occupational therapists, that we were able to take some, risks, knowing that actually going home is the most important thing. And I think these are things we look at there that you can have a little look at. So the aim of our project was to deliver a front door therapy service at the Bristol Royal Infirmary on a Saturday and Sunday to facilitate admission avoidance. And our trial period for our project was January to April 2021, so a little while ago now. And our funding came from Winter Pressures money, and we got funding for one whole-time equivalent therapist, and that money went towards a physiotherapist. However, occupational therapy was provided as part of our pilot because we knew that it was extremely important, our collaborative working. So we knew that however much it wasn't funded, we, as part of our pilot, we inputted OT into it. Okay, so from a timeline point of view, so we started planning our project in November 2020, chatting to the existing teams down in ED, looking at what they do, how they work, and then we reviewed the standards, so looking at things like that already exist, so the competencies by the SAM AHP, we benchmarked against other ED services, and we looked at kind of national guidance and other guidance, things like the Silver Book, to then create a service plan where how we were going to operate, how we created our standards, and how we would then kind of let the wider team know what we were going to do in ED. So then we launched our service in January 2021, inducting our staff within our team, upskilling, teaching people how to assess people at the front door safely. We informed our colleagues down in ED and we started seeing patients. So this is kind of the poster we had down in the emergency department. So we were able to provide a service from 8:30 till 4:30, Saturdays and Sundays. We were a bleep system, but we did present down in ED at 9 and at 1, just to have a chat with the nurse in charge and make sure that, we were kind of chatting through any patients that we thought might be appropriate for us. We aim to see our patients within 4 hours. And we kind of gave the team down in the emergency department a kind of a criteria of patients we could see. However, we were pretty kind of loose and broad on what those patients were, but there's a bit of an example there of things like reduced mobility, falls, the kind of bread and butter that you would see for elderly patients down in the emergency department.
Okay. So as you can see, so the overall outcome of our pilot, we managed to discharge most of the patients that we saw. Oh, sorry, we've just got a bleep going off now. So we actually managed to see, we had 41 referrals, of which we managed to see 37 of them. 26 of those patients that we saw over the 4 months went home. Some of the patients that had referred that we didn't get to see, it was because they had ongoing investigations. They were awaiting sort of outcomes of scans, x-rays, things like that. So we couldn't mobilize them yet, or it was just too late in the day for us to be able to do that. So we managed to discharge 70%, 30% were admitted, but most of the patients that we were seeing as well, we saw in a much quicker response time than 4 hours. It was less than 2 hours. They generally fit our criteria. They were 85 years old, average Rockwood score of 6, generally presenting with falls, reduced mobility and sort of increased care needs and things. So we've just included this slide as well because we are continuing to provide that service. So we've now got sort of over 18 months worth of data as well. And as you can see, our referral numbers have increased. They've fluctuated a little bit depending on what's been happening. Obviously, we did start this pilot when COVID was still very prevalent, and I think we were still in a lockdown when it was happening, which obviously influenced the types of patients that were attending A&E. But we were still managing, so with all this sort of 18 months now under our belt, we're still sort of managing to discharge 60% of the patients. And we've managed to see 132 patients in that time. And the patients that are being admitted, generally, it's not just because of therapy, they've got ongoing medical needs as well. A few patients we haven't been able to see either, we've just not had the capacity to see them, or sometimes we've managed to talk them through with the nursing staff and it can be a nurse-led discharge instead. So as you can see, so actually we've had a really big impact on the service that we provided. So 2/3 of the patients that we saw, we managed to avoid them being admitted into the hospital. So, but unfortunately, 1/3 of those patients did need to come into hospital, but they had a really comprehensive assessment on day 0, which hopefully, reduced their length of stay because of that early assessment. Obviously, length of stay is really multifactorial, so it's difficult to kind of say that it was purely down to us that got them out quicker, but obviously we like to think that we did. But it's also really good for those patients to have those good early assessments so that their admission is planned for and things can be put in place much quicker. So the lessons learned. One of the kind of really big things for us was around the awareness and education for the staff in the emergency department. It's really difficult already having 2 services in A&E in the week with React and Frailty being there. So for us to come in as almost a bit of a 3rd service, it was quite confusing for them, and we'd frequently be called the weekend React service, even though actually what we provide is different because we don't have nurses in the team, and actually we're very much offering a therapy-led assessment. We also, really simple things as well. Our posters just constantly went missing as well, so staff kind of didn't remember that we were there or how to get hold of us. So some really sort of basic challenges. Obviously, we also set this up during COVID-19, so the types of patients that were presenting, it affected our referral numbers initially because of the patients that were coming into the hospital, but safe to say that our referral numbers have significantly increased now that COVID is hopefully on its way out. Also, it's thinking about the skill mix of staff down there because of the increasing complexity of the patients presenting to ED. It was making sure that staff could manage that, they could understand risks and really take that positive risk-taking approach for our patients. Also, one of the really key things for us as well was around those links with community services. We really struggled to kind of get the services in place that might have supported our patients. It's still a bit of an ongoing challenge, but we are starting to build up those links and find out what services we can access. And a really big thing for us as well was the impact on our sort of service that we were doing on the wards as well. ED was always prioritised, so obviously trying to avoid a patient unnecessarily coming into hospital. But with actually only funding for 1 additional member of staff, it was quite difficult to make sure that we were still providing a service across the ward. So, as I say, we are still continuing to provide a therapy service. The pilot was really successful and it was really well recognised that we were doing a good job, which thankfully led to funding. We've got a lot more additional posts in the team. We're an ever-expanding team with increasing sort of specialism. And we are now at a point as well that we are providing a service in the week as well. We are sort of integrating in with the frailty service and supporting with that early assessment and admission avoidance for our sort of frail older patients that are coming through. So this is the funding. These are the posts that we've got, and most of them are filled. We've still got a gap, unfortunately, at the Band 6 OT level and the therapy technician, but it's a growing team, which is really great. So, and all of this has sort of thankfully come from the pilot and the fact that we've been able to show how great a job that we were doing. I've no idea what the time is, but we have time for questions potentially. Are there any questions?
So just had one come up in the chat from Marta. So the question is, how did you communicate this service with the community, please? I guess they need to be prepared for a more urgent response service if you were referring to them over the weekend, and did they have capacity for that?
So I suppose within all of our planning meetings with our seniors and our kind of stakeholders, there were the community services leaders. So there's been lots of kind of frailty meetings within our hospital and within the community. And obviously the community were invited, so they attended those meetings from a senior level. We, I suppose, React are our community link, so they're run by Sirona Care and Health, and they knew that we were running that service, and their manager knew that, and that's what we were doing. So I'd say that was our kind of way in. I wouldn't say that the community service has got a huge amount of referrals from us actually at the weekends, and I think we probably got the stats to back that up, in the fact that actually there isn't a huge response actually from, we would call the single point of access, but at times there wasn't the services out there at the weekends. So actually it was more that somebody had to be safe to go home and be supported by family members, their carers. That's where it was those communications or those conversations we were having, more than with the community services.
Yeah. So I've had a few more questions come up. So I think Verity's trying to, so let us know. But so how long did it take you to set up the project, and what were your first steps?
I think we actually set up the project quite quickly. I think
about 2 months, yeah.
We knew what we wanted to do. We knew we had the funding for an extra member of staff. It was then more just the logistics of getting it going, getting that extra member of staff, communicating it, and I would say it was the delay in starting the project was probably more down to the staffing rather than not knowing what we wanted to do. We kind of very much knew what the guidelines were saying, what the competencies were and things like that. It was then just getting staff upskilled enough to go down and actually having staff in a position to go.
Yeah, I think we also utilised the QI process quite a bit from our hospital. So we were guided by using Project on a Page was one of the big things that we do. And what was the other thing? What's the other one called?
Oh, I don't know. Now you're putting me on the spot.
We used the spreadsheet that we use with Chris all the time. What's that called? He'll murder me for not remembering. It'll come to me. But essentially we did use the QI project, our QI kind of process to actually help guide us through the process in which we had to take before we were ready to launch it. And a Project on a Page was definitely a big thing for
and
us.
the PDSA cycle is always kind of in the back of our minds as well, around what we're actually doing and thinking, and kind of constantly reviewing what we're doing. Action log, that's
we
what
had
we're
an
talking
action
about.
log.
Action log with very tight
I'm happy to
deadlines.
share that with anybody if they wish to.
Yeah, I'm sure people would very much appreciate you sending and putting in the chat any links or anything like that you have. Yes, no, utilizing the QA hub is incredibly helpful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Amy, we've
another
time
question
for one more question.
Okay, well, in order that they've come down, so the next one was from Richard. Did you require coding or data support?
I think the short answer would be no. We very much kind of managed the data collection with between us and in the team, really. We utilised some very useful Band 5s who had a lot of IT experience, and could work Excel extremely well.
We had somebody in our team that previously worked in IT, so I think we
So,
were just very
yeah.
lucky. I think she
Yeah.
deserves a lot of credit actually, because we started it without her, and if our stats would not look as good as they do if it wasn't that she kind of sorted out our spreadsheets. Yeah.
Thank you very much, ladies. We've still got some absolutely brilliant questions I can see coming through in the chat, which I'm really keen to cover. So we can see maybe where we're at the end, or if not, it might be, if you're happy to put your email in the chat, maybe people could email the questions over, and then we could hopefully share them in due course.
Absolutely, we're happy to answer them.
Yeah, I'm also happy I can answer some of them as I see them once the kind of next presentation is playing as well, because I think I can help with some of them.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Okay, should we move on to thank you for that, guys. That's a great start to our webinar, so thank you, appreciate it. So talk two is the pre-recorded talk. So this is from Megan and Lauren, who both work for an Iron Bevan University Health Board Trust. They're both currently in rehab clinical specialist physio roles within that health board, and they're both working as physiotherapists. And so we'll hand over to a talk which is around a wellbeing hub that's been created.
Right, I'm just going to share my screen now.
I just wanted to check everyone can hear the sound okay. And maybe do a thumbs up if you can. Okay.
I think that is as I have it on as high as I can get it. Is it really quiet? Yeah.
And it's quite muffled coming out of my speaker, but it might be my speaker. No, other people in the chat are unfortunately saying it's quite quiet.
Oh. I don't think it's on. Yeah, it's on like the highest from them. Is it too muffled to play, do you think?
From my end, I was unable to hear the words that they were articulating, unfortunately, because it was too muffled.
Okay, I think, shall we hold off on that one and shall we move on to the next presentation? I'll see if I can sort anything in the meantime.
Yeah, okay. So Sam, you've been promoted to talk to. So Sam Cox is going to be talking to us about a collaborative project that they've helped set up with their local exercise provider to offer an exercise class and peer support group for people with newly diagnosed neurological conditions in West Somerset. And Sam has just started her ACP Masters. So good luck with that.
Fab. Thank you, Kerry. Let me just share my screen. Sorry, talk amongst yourselves for a moment. There we go. Lovely. So yes, thanks. My name is Sam Cox. I've just started as a trainee ACP for community rehab in Somerset, but I've been a community physiotherapist for much longer. So I'm just hoping to spend the next 10 minutes talking about quite a small local project that we've been working on over the last year in West Somerset. I just thought it was a nice example of some collaborative working that's been very organic and quite patient-led. We've called it Neuroactive. It's, like Kerry said, it's a community-based exercise class and peer support group for people with newly diagnosed neurological conditions. To give you some context, these are some photos just from my phone of places around West Somerset and the occupational hazards that come with community working. West Somerset is a rural coastal area. It's the gateway to Exmoor and it's a beautiful place to live. However, it does have its issues. As a rural coastal area, it suffers from associated deprivation with concentrations of chronic disease and poor social mobility. It also has one of the oldest average aged populations in the country. And whilst this isn't necessarily a bad thing, it does mean that as community therapists, we are kept very busy and we become specialists in frailty. And notably, we found in this area Parkinson's disease, often being involved at the complex stage of management. So a few years ago, two colleagues of mine, Beth Brewster and Ramona Rebello, attended a course on the exercise approaches for the early stages of Parkinson's. So they came back to work full of enthusiasm about approaching Parkinson's management in quite a different way to how we had been traditionally approaching it. Thinking about proactive management using vigorous exercises with large, fast movements, as opposed to the more traditional approach that we had been using. So we'd started to incorporate this approach into our one-to-one work, and we badgered our local geriatrician and neurologists to send us referrals for people at the stage of diagnosis rather than waiting until further down the line. And this work was really successful. We were getting good outcome measures and really positive feedback from patients who were saying that they enjoyed this style of exercise and felt that they were doing something really positive at a time when they were just dealing with a life-altering diagnosis. Several of these people were asking if there were groups that ran for them to attend. So as a rehab service, we were offering a period of one-to-one input to establish a suitable home-based programme, but then we were expecting them to then carry on with it by themselves. And so they were asking if there was an ongoing group that they could attend to keep them motivated, but we didn't have this available in our local community. And so this was where the idea for Neuroactive came from. We started thinking about it in 2018-19. We hit some stumbling blocks and then, of course, COVID paused any plans for a while. So we came back to the idea in September, last September 21, and established what we really wanted to achieve. And so for us, we wanted to provide we wanted it to be community-based. We wanted it to be ongoing and really proactive and positive class to help people self-manage their neurological conditions. We wanted to offer a class setting to aid motivation, but also to offer a peer support aspect for attendees. We wanted to base it in the community, so outside of the hospital to demedicalise it, but we wanted to be able to maintain good links between the exercise providers and NHS therapists so that we were offering people attending easy access to therapy input to help them self-manage their conditions. How we did it. We initially approached our local exercise providers, which for us is SASP, so Somerset Activity and Sports Partnership. We already had quite a good working relationship with our local team because they deliver the exercise referral scheme in our area. So we shared our ideas of setting up a pay-as-you-go community-based group with an element of peer support. And they were really keen to be involved in the setup and the delivery of this. So as therapists, we brought the clinical background, the theory, the principles of this style of exercise class, and the SASP exercise instructors, Helen and Laura, designed a class based upon those principles. And we were guided by them on practicalities such as like room availability, the class size, what information they would need on referrals. And then once those were agreed, as therapists, we got in touch with patients that had expressed an interest in the past. And we sort of asked our consultants to try and drum up any more referrals for us. So therapists completed the assessments and we took baseline measurements. We tried to choose outcome measures that we hope would give us a spread of information. So we picked a 6-minute walk, 6-metre walk, a 10-bean test, a gas goal, and SASP's attitudes and belief questionnaire. So once we'd completed the assessment and we were happy that the participants could take part in quite a high level of activity, they were ready to start attending the sessions. SASP ran the sessions and they're happy to adjust the exercises to the individuals as needed. And if someone needs more significant adjustments, or if they feel that they're not really appropriate for the group, then we can step in and we can review things. As well as the exercise component of the group, we offer time for peer support and condition management advice afterwards. We agreed that we were going to repeat our outcome measures at 6 and 12 weeks. Will we tweak that slightly to make it 6 and 12 sessions? Just because we felt there's no expectation that people had to attend every week. It wasn't a course that we were running. We wanted it to be there as and when they needed it. So just as things would crop up for us when we attend exercise groups, we wanted the group to be flexible to people's needs. And so here you can just see, so the blue boxes are what the therapists have tended to lead on. The light green are what SASP have led on really. And then the darker green has really been a mixture. So you can just see from that, it's really been a nice collaborative process. And we think about, well, what are we actually offering? We're offering a 40-minute exercise class, which consists of 5 minutes of warm-up that they do as a group. There's 8 circuit-style stations, which will involve both upper and lower limb, large, fast movements. And then in between each circuit station, there is a minute of active rest that they do as a group. So that can be weights, balance, coordination. At the end of the session, there's a 5-minute cool down, and then there's free tea and coffee in the restaurant for peer support and the condition management aspect. Like I said, it's a class rather than a course, so people are free to come and go as they wish. It's pay as you go, so it's £5 a session. That is subsidised by SASP. We have just had our first 3 participants that have completed their 12 sessions, and so we've completed their 12-week outcome measures. The results are very promising, with nearly all of them demonstrating improvement objectively. So this graph, where A, B and C are our participants, and we've got our percentage improvement or not on the left-hand side there. And so you can see anything in green as an improvement. So objectively, we were really pleased. We didn't set out to really make an improvement. What we wanted to do was to try and slow down the progression of diseases. So the fact that there has been some initial improvement has been brilliant. So that's in graph form. And then just on average, we were getting from baseline to 12 weeks an 8.5% improvement in walking speed over 6 minutes, a 9% improvement in walking speed over 6 meters, 16.5% improvement in stride length, and 25.6% improvement in upper limb fine motor movements. And so subjectively, this is Pauline on the right here. Pauline's one of our first 3. And the first week that she attended, she asked me how long she had to keep coming for. And so I explained to her that she didn't have to keep coming at all. It was just there. It was an option for her to come as and when, as long as she found it helpful. And so despite Pauline's reticence, she has been our most consistent attendee and made the most significant objective improvements. In terms of her goal, she wanted to be able to walk for more than half a mile before she felt she slowed down when she was walking with her dog. And she felt that she'd achieved that. And she's intending to keep coming back to the group as long as she can. And here we have Rod and Ray. So Rod on the left is 69 and he recently retired due to struggling to complete the physical aspects of his gardening job. Rod's had some really nice objective improvements with his outcome measures, but as well as that, he's also joined the gym and is now exercising 3 or 4 times a week. And I just think Rod's comment here really emphasises the importance of having this type of support for people. And whilst the objective improvements are great, I think helping people to feel in control of their health and their lives just has to be the most important and valuable part of this work. And then we have Ray on the right here, and Ray is brilliant. He has been doing his exercises individually for a year prior to joining the class. So his baseline measurements started off pretty good anyway. And he has made improvement, but it doesn't look quite as significant as the others, but he started off with a really good baseline. And Ray contributes significantly to the peer support aspect of the group. So he is always sharing information about current PD trials that are taking place, any research that he's been reading about, any webinars that he sees are coming up. And as a group, the topics that they discuss range from their medication regimes, tips to managing tremors, and even sort of, when things like Parkinson's crop up in the media and how they feel they are represented. So then what next? So we're at the stage really where our class has been running since May now, and we have a small core of attendees. For us personally in West Somerset, we really want this to continue. And so we're working with SASP to see how we can make it sustainable and financially viable. West Somerset historically struggles with numbers of attendees for things like this. So this is something that we're working hard to maintain. We're also now starting to work with our colleagues in neighbouring rehab teams to look at rolling out similar style groups across Somerset. So I just think it's quite a nice example of a grassroots project that's developed organically from enthusiastic therapists and patients identifying a need. It's just some nice collaborative work with other service providers. And personally, it's been a real pleasure to have a project like this to work on, particularly after a tough couple of years for community rehab. It's been really brilliant to return to some nice proactive rehab work. And that's it. If anyone would like any more information, I'm very happy for people to contact me. I've just got, just a few thank yous there. And here's my Twitter and email address. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sam. Honestly, that sounds like an absolutely brilliant project. And we've started getting some questions coming up in the chat. So there's one that says, sorry if I missed it, but is 12 weeks just the time point to repeat outcome measures? Or, can people continue beyond 12 weeks if they so wish?
Yes, they can definitely. That's what we wanted, to make sure that there wasn't a limit to it. So we just chose 12 weeks. It's probably an arbitrary number really, for our outcome measures. And the idea is that it was an ongoing group. We didn't want to have to put an endpoint on it so that then people then had to carry on doing something by themselves. So they can just keep coming as long as they want to.
Brilliant. Another question was, were there any barriers in joint working with NHS systems and outside service providers?
It didn't feel like there was, to be honest. I think from the NHS side, we were anticipating more barriers, but I think because SASP have done quite a lot of projects and they've worked jointly with the NHS on other projects as well. So they were much more confident about how we negotiated things around confidentiality and sharing of information. So that was really helpful, because I think this was the first time from the NHS side that we had really sort of stepped into this more collaborative working. So it was good that SASP did have that experience and were able to guide us.
Great. And then one from Fenella. What training on Parkinson's disease exercise did the therapists or exercise leads attend that kick-started this class and their ability, I suppose, to carry out the group sessions?
Yeah, so I think initially it had been, they had attended some PD Warrior induction, and that was part of one of our stumbling blocks when we first looked into it. So then we started exploring the evidence more widely and looked into other things, so like LSVT big as well, just to see what was out there and the evidence around. So there'll be a combination. We've sort of taken the principles of those sorts of things and the evidence that suggests circuit style training and boxing and really high intensity type exercises are good for early intervention Parkinson's. So we've sort of amalgamated all of it and then applied it to the people that are in our cohort.
Grand. The questions keep on coming, Sam. Did you have anyone with other neurodiagnoses? And if you didn't, is this something you might consider in the future? And that was from Catherine.
Yes, and we called it neuroactive because we wanted it to be open to other conditions. We didn't want it to be exclusively for Parkinson's, even though we suspected that in our area it probably would be Parkinson's heavy. We just haven't really had anybody else that's been appropriate or that's been referred or flagged up to us, but we definitely are open to it. We just haven't had that yet. It's not a barrier as such, but one of the difficulties has really been trying to get the referrals from our consultants and from neurologists at a much earlier stage. So that's something we're still working on.
Grand.
Time for one more question, Amy.
If there are two, we've got two potentially slightly shorter questions. Is that all right? We've got time for. Yeah. So one question is, how did you know who to contact in SASP?
It just sort of fell into it accidentally. I turned up to a meeting that I'm standing in for my manager, and they were talking about a Love to Pedal scheme, and they were looking for people to support them. So I sort of said, I'm happy to support. By the way, I've also got another project I'd like to talk about. It just sort of happened like that. Yeah.
Networking is key. And a final question from Sue, who said, fantastic, Sam. Is there a plan to roll it out to East Somerset?
I think that is definitely the plan, Sue, and Sarah Doble, who's clinical specialist physio, has just taken over from Heather, is involved in sort of helping the rollout across the county. So I've spoken to people sort of Taunton and Bridgewater teams because they're the closest ones to us, and then I think it will hopefully cascade out.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for answering those questions, Sam.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I think our plan is to move on to Lizzie Shaw's presentation now, after our slight technical glitch. So Lizzie is a colleague of mine who works at North Bristol Trust, NHS Trust in Bristol. She works for our Frailty Front Door team, and she's going to talk to you about an upper limb fracture project that she's been working on, which I think she would agree has taken over her life for the last couple of years. So over to you, Lizzie.
Hi, thanks, Kerry. So yeah, I work at the acute frailty unit at Southmead Hospital, but I've been in the trust for 17 years. And I think part of my engagement with this project has been seeing these patients come across my caseload in lots of settings. And for many years, seeing them get stranded and having networked, I think everyone's seen similar patients that nobody knows quite what to do with an older person told to do nothing with a broken arm. So I've been working on this for 3 years. And I want to share my experience of quality improvement, both the good and the bad, in the hope that you can learn from some of my mistakes. So I'm going to be looking a bit more at the project process as much as the project itself, which is too big to cram into 10 minutes. And hopefully you'll be inspired to use the QI process effectively in whatever project you're working on where you are, once I've talked about how I did it. Let me get my slides. So we started back in 2019, actually. I was starting to look at this at the front door, and then I came across a colleague who was working on the complex care wards, also looking at the issue because we'd had a spike in admissions, but it really wasn't a new problem. As I say, these patients had sat for a long time and they couldn't access the social care pathways because they were non-weight bearing and it was deemed a health issue. And they were managed under medicine in our trust. And myself and my colleague Tom, who were working on this, had both done orthopaedic rotations and were aware that if you asked the right orthopaedic doctor on the right day at the right time, and you've raised the frailty issues with these patients, then they might well change the status to weight bearers tolerated. And so at the beginning of the project, we thought this would be quite a neat thing we could do to improve awareness of frailty and to get the orthopaedic doctors proactively thinking about the weight bearing as tolerated options for these patients. So upper limb fractures are the second most common fracture requiring admission to hospital after hip fracture. And at 1 year, 20.5% have died compared to 29.5% in hip fracture. In our trust, we've got reasonable delivery of a clinical geriatric assessment on admission. And we had this reasonable orthopaedic plan, but the two things often didn't come together and they were in contradiction to what the frail older person might need to recover well from their injury. The QI that we formed at the beginning was a fairly loose team, and I think the timing's important to mention at this point that this was around January 2020 and the main launch came into March 2020. So I think COVID had an impact on how our actual project played out. One of the first engagement sessions we had was with orthopaedic clinical governance, where, as I say, we just flagged these issues, started to talk about frailty, and within 1 minute of us trying to talk, they came up with an immediate solution that we weren't quite expecting. And they said that all patients with a broken arm in our trust with immediate effect should be managed weight bearers tolerated from the time of injury. And this was regardless of injury severity or location. And no other backing was put into this statement. It was just shared across the trust that this was now the new process, which made Tom and I quite nervous because we didn't have evidence to back it up. And we were seeing the patients come across our caseload with horribly broken arms, and trying to make them use them early seemed challenging at best. But the impact we had very quickly on length of stay was significant. And the trust was quite excited, understandably, that we'd had a huge impact on length of stay. As I say, COVID had a bit of an impact on that. Some of our geriatrician colleagues got quite excited about it a bit later, and that encouraged us to publish, which we did, to the British Geriatric Society. But again, we were still a bit anxious that the only measurement we really had was the length of stay, which didn't really help us to describe to other trusts what we'd done or how we'd done it. And it still felt like we were backfilling and case studying and tweaking left, right and centre. So to share that didn't feel a very safe thing to do, particularly for the more severe injuries. What we've gradually realised that weight bearers tolerated isn't the thing that fixes this problem. What it really means is we're removing the functional restrictions and allowing them to use as pain allows. So it's really about the function, not the weight bearing. And it's really permission from trauma and orthopaedics for somebody to understand the injury and to put the person's frailty and function first. So it's an opportunity for us as therapists to take this forward in a way we've never been able to do. And in our trust, the orthopaedic team took that risk on our behalf, and they've allowed us to make the progress that we've made. In brief, and if anybody wants to know more, please get in touch. But basically the wrists, the proximal humeruses and the clavicles are the ones that are the easiest to roll out once you've got a system going. For wrists, as long as you get them out of the heavy, bulky, ill-fitting back slabs as soon as possible, or consider a Futura splint if it's appropriate, then that's going to enable them to use the hand better. And as long as that person can compensate around their cast, they are definitely getting out of hospital sooner. The proximal humeruses are much more painful, much more of an impact on things like bed transfers and toileting. But if you can allow them just that little bit of extra time for the initial pain to settle, and I always say this is very much guided by pain. I don't want these patients to be put through encouraging to use the limb too soon. But if you allow them that extra time, they are again moving through the pathway better, using their arm to toilet themselves in a way that I would have never seen it 2 or 3 weeks previously in an injury like that. And the clavicle pictured isn't one of the ones that was easy. We've had a couple that are coming through the skin who've needed a very palliative approach, in fact. But for the simple clavicle fractures, orthopedics still want those wrapped up in poly slings, which are a very challenging sling for an older person to wear. But we found ways to offload the arm in an advice leaflet that helps them to not be stuck in hospital while they're in those more difficult slings. And these are the injuries that keep me awake at night, that make me think weight bearing is tolerated on its own isn't as simple as it sounds. Our trust are very reluctant to fix these injuries. The one on bottom left is one of only 2 that we've had fixed. And I find that my role is advocating for these patients to try and get them fixed where appropriate. So our new pathway is much more patient-centred, and our clinical geriatric assessment takes the injury into account with the orthopaedic plan, but they work together so that the person can make a recovery in a way that they wouldn't have done traditionally. But all of our evidence, as I say, has been on a case study by case study basis, and some measurement against people being more likely to make it return to their own home or to rehab and then home rather than long-term care after these injuries. So we do keep an eye on our data, because for the last 2 years we've been business casing to try and do this properly. And as you can see, we've got a spike here coming into this year that we unfortunately haven't sustained our intervention. And there's a few reasons for this. What I will definitely say is from the outset, we haven't really followed a PDSA cycle. We haven't followed a true quality improvement process. What we've done has been huge. It's been a clinical transformation project. It's possibly been a pilot study for having a trauma frailty therapist embedded into our medical department. But it's been all done without any funding or clinical time to do it properly. And we've almost been swimming against the tide trying to work out how things could go. What I'd also say is, because it's been an interdepartmental project, we've been trying to engage with the emergency department so that we get the advice right from the beginning. Trauma and orthopedics, who change staff and don't tell each other about the project, even though they still want it. And trying to keep a quality improvement project across so many departments it's very hard to engage people and to maintain them in that team. So I've had an idea. If we're not going to get our business case taken forward despite the funding, the bed days that we've saved, how can we embed it? And one of the things that struck me for our frail older patients throughout this is how much time they spend in fracture clinic, and for that not to go on and change any of their clinical management. So particularly the proximal humeruses are not converting to surgery. Our fracture clinic times are often 2 or 3 hours when they're away from the ward. That might take staffing away from the ward for a prolonged period as well. And it's also an opportunity for the orthopedic team to right the wrong management that we then have to chase, or for the community team to assume that something's changed and to have to keep chasing the fracture clinic teams. And it's increasingly become apparent that this isn't a frail older person problem. We've actually got an inherent problem at North Bristol Trust with our fracture clinic process, in that every patient has to attend fracture clinic to get a clinical record that goes onto an orthopedic system that isn't shared with the community, and to generate an open appointment. So they're often discharged same day. And the orthopedic team themselves have recently audited and shown 30% of their injuries didn't actually need to come to clinic, but they don't have a process to address it. So I approached them and said, I've got some ideas to improve this for the frail older people, but we could use it for other injuries too, which they have bitten my hand off for. And I've been really keen from the outset to really understand that PDSA cycle and to make it really clear that we're following that, so that it's much easier to embed, to measure. And also, if we go on to any publications like we did last time, it's much easier if you've followed a true process to then share that elsewhere. The notes on the screen are a bit of a work in progress, but I've got a consultant from the emergency department. I've got an ESP from the emergency department. I've got 2 fracture clinic orthopedic consultants. I find the best way to engage them is to know that they've got no time, to do as much preparation for any meeting that we have in advance, and then to go to them with ideas that they can sign off. And that seems to be working so far. We're still in the planning stages, but it does seem to be working. And as I'll show you on my next slide, the idea of this is to embed our original guideline in a neat side effect to the fracture clinic QI. So this is just for proximal humeruses. And so obviously it's for anyone with a proximal humerus fracture, for anyone in the emergency department to follow. But when they get to the frailty side, they immediately embed our guideline, if I get this to work, as I hope I will. So the patient gets an information leaflet from the outset. Orthopedics don't need to write anything in the notes, so they can't write the wrong thing because that's their clinical management. They get a clinical letter generated in the emergency department, and then the community teams can see that as well. And so hopefully a nice side effect of this, they'll stay out of fracture clinic, they won't spend those additional hours, and we'll get our guideline finally embedded for at least some of the injuries. I was a bit worried about fitting this into 10 minutes, so I probably rushed on. It was a huge project. Contact me directly if you want to know more about managing the broken arms. If you want to know more about the QI process, I encourage you to engage with your QI teams wherever you are, or get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. Honestly, that sounds absolutely revolutionary to patient care, and a huge project as well. So thank you for pioneering it. So I've got a question coming on the chat from Charlotte. What is the long-term outcome of the actual injury? Has using the arm earlier been detrimental to their overall recovery, or has it produced a better overall outcome, would you say?
So the only way I've been able to measure that has been on case studies, and speaking to orthopedics about complications. Orthopedics are clear in our trust that the only complication they're interested in for most of these injuries is if it breaches the skin, so it displaces so much it comes through the skin. They don't feel that the evidence for proximal humerus is, I'll try and stick with one injury at a time because it's too difficult otherwise, further displacement really doesn't correlate to worse outcomes. They're bad injuries anyway. If they're comminuted, they're bad anyway. And from the case studies I've done, the worst thing you can do is say do nothing. Anything else is a bonus. The chronic stiffness, the chronic pain is going to be as much from disuse as any further displacement of the injury. That's what we're hoping. It needs to be measured more.
Yeah, absolutely. So a comment from Catherine, fantastic talk, amazing. Shika, apologise if I've pronounced your name incorrectly, has asked, please may we have your email address to gather a bit more information. Please, Lizzie, if you're happy to maybe put that in the chat, that would be brilliant. Richard has said, inspired me to do the same in Newcastle.
I was going to mention that.
He has asked, what do you think the fracture clinic appointment reduction will be?
So just for proximal humeruses, we're hoping it will be 30%. I've done a cost calculation and it's going to be about 20,000 across the year for proximal humeruses and clavicles. That was costed based on porter time as well for the time away from the wards, because it's a £40 an appointment. But it should be reasonably significant and enough to pay me for my time on 2 days is what I'm thinking, but it hasn't worked. I will just mention, Richard, so I am happy for anybody to take forward the elements that I haven't got time to do. And so Richard's going to run a project locally, which I'm really excited about. And I have lots of different bits I could delegate out. I'm very keen for anyone who works in the community or rehab settings who would like to help me devise the exercise programme that goes with our leaflet for proximal humeruses. Thank you.
No, it's great. It's great to share the ongoing projects that continue to go around with your work.
We've got time for one more question.
Okay, we have got too many questions for the amount of time, I'm afraid. But the last question then is from Sarah, who says, I would love to know more. I work in community and agree we don't always have info passed to us about what we should or shouldn't be doing and if follow-up needed, etc. So I suppose her question is there anything that stands out to you that we should or shouldn't be doing? And at what point would you definitely say refer on for fracture clinic or ongoing support in the community perhaps?
It so depends on your local pathway. So if you're going to have early weight bearing, it has to come from the surgeons. So you have to have 100% buy-in because they're taking the risk for the complications. If we'd been successful with our business case, which we'll keep going on, one of the main roles was going to be a liaison between community and fracture clinic, because that's a really good way to keep people out of clinic and to not delay their recovery. We get huge delays with lack of information, and it affects patient flow if they're in the rehab beds, but it delays their recovery if they aren't given the right information early enough. So, you know, keep pushing for people to be in these posts and to have a liaison between fracture clinic that's clinical with frailty experience is what I think.
Sarah, I hope that answers your question. Please do feel free to jump on the microphone at this point if you
you're
want
in
to
Bristol,
clarify.
just message me, I'll still help.
Sarah, was there anything else you wanted to add or just double check? Does that answer your question okay? I think hopefully it's covered. Thank you so much, Lizzie.
I'm trying to stop sharing. It keeps coming up with a pop-up box. Sorry, hold on.
I'll hopefully be able to take over now, and I'm hoping
Thank you.
that I'll be able to make this work with sharing sound. So let me try this first of all, and let me know if it's working.
Glassadorlan. We are in South Wales and we are a purpose-built wellbeing hub. So T Glassadorlan. So this is our instruction.
Can I just check, can people hear that okay?
Yeah.
Lovely.
Are you able to make it full screen at all?
Yeah, I will,
So
yeah.
because of legislation that you can Bangor Council wanted to find out if they were going to meet the legislation before it came into the Act. And so they looked at identifying a external agency that used a vanguard approach. And they identified that Torfaen County Borough Council were not going to meet the above acts. So what they wanted to do was they looked at setting up Tŷ Glas y Dorlin, and that opened in 2021, and we've been in post for 7 months now. We had integrated funding from the Welsh Government to set up the building, along with funding from the local authority. And we're currently now just based on funding from the local authority and social services. We are, like we said, a purpose-based building, and we really wanted to have a very dynamic building that really shaped around the person and the individual at the centre of their care. It really is an environment that can mimic a true home-like environment. So we were able to assess people and provide their rehab in a way that really is like their home.
So if I talk a little bit about the services available here at Tŷ Glas y Dorlin, as Lauren just said, we are a purpose-built wellbeing hub. We've got 6 long-term residential flats here, 2 of which are double rooms, allowing a husband and wife to be placed together. And for the long-term residents, we provide support to help them live sort of as independently as possible with their different levels of need. We also then have 12 short stay rehab beds, which we are mainly involved with. So they're a short stay of up to 28 days, 2 of which are bariatric, and they are equipped with all the appropriate equipment for manual handling, and they are wheelchair accessible. And 1 of our short stay beds is a double again, so it allows husband and wife or partners to be placed together to help with their rehabilitation. And in addition to that, we do have a bookable respite bed as well for any planned respite through social services. And then if we talk a little bit about what makes us different to a sort of traditional rehab hospital or community hospital place, all of our beds here are within self-contained flats. So every individual who stays with us have their own front door, so they've got their own bedroom, fully equipped kitchen, living room, and own bathroom. So as Lauren said, it's sort of set up to mimic them being at home as best possible. There's no sort of restricted time for visitors, so relatives can come and go as they please. And the individuals that stay with us, they are to provide their own shopping, so food and drinks are not provided on site. So the expectation is for them to live their life like they normally would. So it's more meaningful to them, or we can get them back doing what they would normally do pre-admission. The care that we provide you can be flexed up and down to meet individuals' needs. And the rehab here is tailored as well, and it's available daily as we are running a 7-day-a-week service. We also then provide some sessional work. So we try to engage all the individuals here with meaningful activities to them. So we do work on what their likes and dislikes are, and again, the activities that are run do change depending on what the likes and dislikes of the individuals staying are. And we try and meet their social well-being and physical needs through those sessional activities, as well as integrating the local community, which then helps to target any sort of loneliness, as we do get a lot of elderly people coming through that do normally live by themselves. Once they leave us here, then we do try and encourage people to come back as well to access the sessional work. We can also provide an outreach service for continuity of care. So whether that be a short-term package of care or therapy within their own home, we try to have a seamless transition home and tie up all the goals rather than refer on to any other service. And we provide access and home visits as well for really strategically planned discharges. And we are also setting up a step-up pathway with the Welsh Ambulance Service. So to target the non-injury fallers that would default go to A&E, which we know is not the best place for them, we are going to have a direct referral pathway for the non-injury fallers to come straight to us for their rehabilitation and to bypass the acute sector as well.
Okay, so if we just move on to staffing, we have some of the traditional staffing, people that you would expect to see, like 2 physiotherapists, 2 occupational therapists and 6 rehab assessors, which are like your band 4 physiotechs or your generic technicians. We have 30 enablement support workers, which are like your care staff that work with much more re-enablement or re-enabling ethos. But then we also have less traditional roles here, like a guest experience lead. What she would do is have that initial conversation with someone when they come into Tŷ Glas y Dolin and ask that what matters to you question. So from the very beginning, we are working towards that very person-centred care and really truly that co-production with the patient as they come into Tŷ Glas y Dolin. She then follows their full experience and their journey through Tŷ Glas. And when they then go home, she's responsible for following up on some of the outcome measures when they do go home at 3 months and 6 months. And she collates the PREMs, the patient reported experience measures as well. So we make sure that when they do go home, if there's anything we've missed, if there's anything that we can outreach, then at that point we will continue to provide service if needed. We also have a technology coach and wellbeing officer. She has some really innovative gadgets and technology that we can use with people that we have been shown to reduce packages of care and provide more meaningful experiences for people with dementia, for example. Really useful for activity if people are struggling to take part in some activities or group work isn't for them. She has some wonderful technology that we can use there. We also have an entertainment lead who will tailor the entertainment in the building for what activities that the people in the building really like. So that can be the long-term residents that we have, or it could be the short-term guests that we have here for re-enablement, looking at what activity they like, so that when they leave Tŷ Glas y Dolin, they can come back to us, so that we're really trying to combat that isolation that they have in the community.
So obviously being a new project, and myself and Lauren have only been in post for the last 7 months, there have been some challenges that we've faced with sort of the original setup. So having referrals through, we are getting a lot of sort of poor information and finding that they're not really timely, and that we could be having people a lot quicker from the hospital setting to save hospital stay times. To target this, we've been doing a lot of education with the ward staff and sending in the re-enablement assessors to almost assess and pull people out of the hospital at a more timely phase, which has been very successful. And we are now looking at a telephone system for referrals rather than filling in the electronic paper form, because again, we've figured out that on the wards, the staff just don't have the time to be filling out the electronic paperwork for us. Obviously, with the national care crisis at the moment, that's been a big sort of blockage for patient flow. So we're trying to avoid sort of that bottleneck when people come from the acute setting to us. We're able to sort of improve this by providing our own outreach. So if we know somebody is only going to need a very short-term package of care on initial return home, we can provide that ourselves with either the enablement support workers or with the re-enablement assistants, depending on what the needs are. And we're trying to be a bit more creative as well. So we offer sessional work here for bathing. So we've got bathing facilities within their own property. They can't access ours here. So just trying to be a bit more creative with sort of care packages and how people are accessing their facilities. And then the use of assistive technology as well. So especially with medication administration, trying to maximise the use of the assistive tech with our coaches here to try and avoid the need for additional care. The 28-day stay, again, could be a challenge because lots of people don't meet all of their goals. But again, we can provide the outreach so we can transition the person home and then achieve their goals with them in their own home environment. And we're just quite strict on having clear exit plans. So if somebody is coming to us, that they're fully aware of the timescales and that we've got the clear goals and what is expected to get them home safely. And that we found, because we are traditionally, well, we are employed by health. We were employed by Nyren Bevan Health Board, and we run a service level agreement to Tŷ Glas y Dolin, which is social services based. So we're working a lot more closely now with the social workers, and we have come to the realisation they are quite risk adverse to discharging people with reduced packages of care. So it's just that education, communication, and working really closely together to provide the evidence that it's not always needed. But that is something that's definitely improving.
So we thought if we just show you a bit of a case study so you can see the type of one of our success stories from the past. So we did have a chap who was a 69-year-old male. He was on a rehabilitation ward and he actually wasn't referred to us. So we went on to see someone else and caught him on the ward and thought, oh, he would be perfect for Tiglass-Adolin. He was on the waiting list for a community resource team package of care for ×3 daily. So he was going to go home with the 6 weeks free care with CRT. But he was waiting for a number of days for that, and there was still a wait. There was no discharge in sight at that point. On the ward, he was quite an anxious chap. He was having panic attacks. He was diagnosed with agoraphobia, so he did really struggle with the hospital environment. He was initially admitted with an acute kidney injury and alcoholism. And then when he transferred, on the ward, he was transferring with assistance of 2 and a Zimmer frame, so it was quite a high level of need. We pulled him from the ward and he came and had a 28-day stay at Tiglass-Adolin. He got on much better with the front door type style setup that we have here and engaged really well with the physiotherapy and occupational therapy here. He did have input every single day of the week, because like I said, we work Saturday and Sunday. We worked with him to a point where we discharged him home to his own ground floor flat. He had no package of care on discharge, and he was still coming into Tiglass-Adolin for showering because he couldn't access his own bathing facilities. So that barrier that was there for discharging, we managed to overcome that, and we still get him in and see him twice a week. He pays, I think, £10 a week to access that service, but he's more than happy to do that, has a cup of tea with us, and that is far better than him. Because prior to his hospital admission, he hadn't left his house in 4 years. So he now is independently mobile with a 4-wheeled walker. We feel like we could progress him further, but he's quite keen to stick with his walker now. But we think that's one of our best success stories here.
So just in summary, the wellbeing model has proven very successful so far. It's definitely improved patient experience based on all of the data collected by the guest experience lead and the feedback that we've had from individuals that have stayed with us. It's helping to reduce health inequalities within the local community and improve health and social resilience. It's improved staff and user wellbeing. And it's ensuring that the right care, the right person, the right time and the right place is all being addressed. It's had big financial benefits for both health and social care. And it's definitely a more meaningful rehab environment for individuals coming to stay here. Just briefly, sort of plans for the future. We are the first of this kind in Wales, so we're hoping that the model will get rolled out sort of more nationally within Wales. For us here at Tiglass, we are going to be looking at further health promotion with the community, looking at increasing our sessional work, targeting the needs of the local community. At the moment, we are running a Tai Chi session, which is really well attended, and we're looking at sort of finding out what the local community would like to see here and trying to integrate them with decisions being made. We'll be looking at further staff training, embedding the EQ5D outcome measure on the WICA system that we use for our documentation so that we can gather instant statistical information. And we are supporting innovation and research projects with our local university as well. So we've got lots going on. Lots to look forward to.
Any questions, please don't hesitate to pop them in the chat and they'll get forwarded to our email addresses. Our email addresses are up there, so if anyone wants to send us a direct message, we'd be more than happy to receive any visitors here if you wanted to come and look around as well, because I know we are the first in Wales. or equally, if anyone has anything similar to this, I know in the southwest of England, we would love to hear some of your challenges and successes and learn from each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I know they're not here to answer any questions directly, but Claire, I didn't know whether you wanted to jump in at this point. If you have an answer, we've got one question from Christine, who's asked what assistive technology has been successful in managing medications. I don't know whether that was a question that came up at all yesterday.
No, sorry, it wasn't. I was kind of mainly asking them around patients who have like a cognitive impairment and how they manage that for people who are in kind of the individual flats, but they felt actually with the assistive technology that they have, which was more related to kind of fall sensors, that was really beneficial. So they were able to support those people, and they could also help them come to some of the like communal areas. They also felt having the double rooms was obviously amazing. So there were some patients who the husband can't manage at home without the wife. So wife was admitted to hospital, and actually they're able to help the gentleman move into one of their beds while his wife is in hospital, and then she was able to come and stay there as well. So that was most of it, but I can pop the email addresses in the chat, Christine, as well, so if you want to email them directly for more information.
So there haven't been any other questions at this point in the chat, but loads and loads of praise throughout the evening for all our speakers. Really, really positive comments, and it seems like everyone is completely inspired by all the amazing work that's going on in the Southwest.
So over to Stephanie now, just to finish off.
Thank you. So hi, I'm Stephanie and I'm the student officer for Agile. First of all, I really appreciate you all joining us tonight and hope you found this webinar held by the West and Wales Committee informative. And I just want to say thank you to all the speakers for such a great presentation. These topics are really important for us to know and learn about, and how this is beneficial to patient care, especially for the older population. And so thank you for teaching us about it all. And I'm sure that a lot of us has taken so much from it, because I'm sure that I definitely have. And if you're interested in joining the West and Wales Committee, please get in contact with